The country of Iran has called out the bluff of the US military and the United States. Here's what I mean by this. At the time of making this video, we have attacks from Iran over in Iraq, over in Syria, and also utilizing Houthi groups out of Yemen to strike a civilian ship. Now, here's where Iran is calling the bluff of the United States. Either you haven't heard about this or you probably already forgot about this. Only 3 days ago from the time of making this video, Joe Biden himself put a message out publicly stating that the United States sent a message privately directly to Iran in response to the whole Houthi attacks, essentially letting the people know Iran knows better to attack anything in the Middle East. They quote unquote got the message. Now look, we don't know what the exact private message was, but we do know that the intentions were quite simple. Do not attack any more targets in the Middle East, and do not go after US assets. Ever since Joe Biden, again 3 days ago from the time of making this video, put that statement out there, it looks like things have ramped up in the Middle East, where Iran is willing to strike cities like Erbil, very close to the US-led coalition headquarters, take out Israeli assets in the region, go after assets in Syria, and also continue to utilize their Houthi fighters out of Yemen. We live in a day and age now where the US military has a major Achilles heel. Even though the US military is without a doubt the strongest military in the world, when it comes to their economics, when it comes to their military strategy, no country one-on-one can defeat the US military as it stands. However, the Achilles heel for the US military, and Iran has exploiting this in the last few weeks, essentially the US military cannot defeat a militant group or militia group one-on-one. It's almost impossible to do if these militant groups can just blend in with the population. Now, Iran knows, again, they cannot defeat the US military one-on-one, but they do know the Achilles heel of the United States. Utilize Houthis, utilize Hezbollah, utilize whatever they can to deter the United States. Now, when you put everything into context, you have to understand the US military right now, their major objective in the Middle East is to defend Israel from any sort of outside attacks. That is what Joe Biden has said. That is what the State Department has said. This is the job of the Pentagon, to make sure that the Middle East does not destabilize and spread out with proxy wars throughout the Middle East. But as we can see and as it stands, it does look like we're starting to see an uptick in violence, especially in the country of Iraq. If you guys are unaware, in the country of Iraq, back in 2020, the US has said we are done with combat operations. This is because there was a retaliation strike on a Revolutionary Guard leader, and because of this, Iraq was extremely pissed off, Iran was extremely pissed off, and they were willing to kick out the United States military out of Iraq. However, the US said back in 2020, we are done with combat operations, but ever since October 7th, 2023, we are starting to see attacks up in about 100 to 120 separate attacks. And even though the US military is not technically on offensive combat operations, they have done retaliation strikes. Now, understand in Iraq right now, they are extremely pro-Iran. So Iran holds this momentum to where maybe we can make the United States look really bad in the region, and maybe we can bait them for more retaliation strikes. Because look, right now, the US military is under a massive threat of getting kicked out of Iraq. The Pentagon has not really acknowledged this. The State Department has said nothing about this. All the Pentagon has stated was, hey, we know nothing about this. Go divert this to the State Department. Pentagon knows nothing about getting kicked out of Iraq. Now, the main question is this. What exactly is the Commander-in-Chief Joe Biden going to do? He has already been extremely hesitant, but also patient in doing any sort of retaliation strikes. When we saw the first retaliation strike with targets in Syria, Joe Biden only wanted to go after infrastructure. But then all of a sudden, the United States was backed into a corner over in Iraq when we were at about attack number 60, and Joe Biden actually authorized utilizing an AC-130J gunship to take out actual militant targets, people. The US military also waited about 2 months to fulfill attacks over Yemen, taking out 60 separate targets. And the thing that's interesting is that Iran, again, has managed to exploit this very patient U.S. military, where eventually the U.S. military has no choice but to attack. The U.S. military has historically known to be very aggressive. I've been saying this in almost all my videos because I want you guys to look back in history where in the mid-2000s, if you ever said anything bad about the U.S. military or took out a U.S. target, you're going to get attacked tenfold. But then this caused more issues. So look, the U.S. military finds themselves where they don't want to cause more militant groups or militia groups to strike U.S. assets and targets because the job of the U.S. military currently by Joe Biden and his statements is to keep the peace in the Middle East, but Iran has different plans. As long as Iran can keep the momentum going in Iraq, they might see some significant gains in seeing a very negative outlook on the U.S. military in the Middle East, trying to get them out of the Middle East to get out of the way to where Iran can go after their main target, which is Israel. Now, we'll see what happens, and we'll see if the U.S. military will actually retaliate on Iranian targets. The issue is this. Now that the actual big country of Iran has said we are the ones who took out Iraqi targets, they don't have anything to do with the United States, but they're close enough to where the U.S. has condemned these attacks. We'll see what happens. I don't necessarily see the United States going after big country Iran targets. Maybe they'll just go after more Houthi assets. Maybe they're just going to stick to their strategy. But now the ball is in the U.S. court. Are they going to retaliate? Is Joe Biden going to take a more aggressive stance? Again, Joe Biden said we put out a private message. Iran took that message, threw it in the garbage, and they still conducted more strikes. They're still helping Yemen or the Houthis. So we'll see what happens. It looks like it's getting extremely dangerous out there. And it looks like we are now seeing the uptick in sporadic attacks throughout the Middle East. I think it's a terrible thing. I would love to see peace in the Middle East, but I'm just going to keep reporting the facts.